Thank you for joining us this morning. Today's Wheel and Anchor webinar is all about our ever popular program, Croatia, Slovenia, and the Adriatic Coast, where we will be returning in May of 2024. In fact, we have a group there now sailing amongst the archipelago of Croatia, and they're having a marvelous time. As I said at the outset, the weather has taken a turn for the better in Europe, and they're basking in the sun as they visit all these wonderful islands. Let me say a few words about Wheel and Anchor for those of you who are new to our community, and I'll try and keep this brief because I know a lot of you have heard the spiel before, so you can grab a cup of coffee while I take a moment to explain what we are all about. And so I have been organizing trips for Canadians for 33 years. I started way back in 1990, in fact, and ever since I have been, I've spent most of my career creating trips for Canadians. And the thing that I noticed about is that there is a special dynamic if you have a group of people that are somehow connected, that have some like-minded approach to travel, to looking at the world, to meeting other people. And as Canadians in particular, we have certain traits, and I think that I can speak on behalf of most of our Canadian travelers. We prefer to travel amongst ourselves, which is not to say we have a small handful of people that come from other countries, but for the most part, we are sort of 99% Canadian, and we share a bit of a philosophy and outlook on the world, and a way to sort of come into countries with a sense of curiosity, a sense of a soft touch, and respecting local culture, and asking the right questions, not asking the wrong questions. And when you have that, the dynamic amongst the group is very, very different and very positive, and people come away from our trips really having a sense of having traveled with a bunch of friends. And so this is what's behind our motto about bringing travelers together. This is our goal, our mission. And in the course of doing that, we become well-traveled in the sense of, having really experienced a place. And, I'm here in Puglia in southern Italy right now, because we're developing a new trip for here. And I come to find out what are those local experiences, where are those places to stay. And I'm staying in one of these traditional houses here because I wanted to see, is this the kind of experience that we want to have? And this is how we work all of our trips, which are all curated by myself, obviously, with the help of my whole team. And as I say, in the course of doing all that, we become connected to our fellow travelers, to the people that we meet along the way, and to the culture and traditions that we want to introduce you to. So that's a little bit of the philosophy. This is a great shot from a group on Lake Bled, which is of course the first part of our itinerary, a trip that we did there a few years back. You get a sense of, and we don't just take group photos for the sake of taking group photos, but we have a great time, and that's what we're all about at Wheel and Anchor. So joining me today on our webinar, I was supposed to be introducing our partners from Croatia, Sarah and Miranda, who I have, and I'm just going to have another look to see if they've shown up. Let me see if they have snuck in here. No, I don't see them. That's very odd. Okay, so I was just chatting with them a half an hour ago. They must be having some kind of technical difficulties. But in any case, joining me today, of course, is Barb, one of our trip specialists, Barb and Paula, who are the people who you will speak to when you give our office a call, and who will help you get organized. And let's be honest, I couldn't do this without them. And as I say, are there to answer all your questions and make sure that you get the information you need before joining one of our trips. And again, I hope to introduce to you Sarah and Miranda, and perhaps they'll show up. Barb, would you do me a favor and keep an eye on that participant list if you see Sarah? And if she does come in, we'll get her on the webinar. But otherwise, we're just going to proceed without, because luckily I know this program like the back of my hand, so we don't have to rely on our special guests. So the plan today is to take you on, as I like to call it, a digital journey through these wonderful countries, Slovenia, Croatia, and of course we have a day in Austria as well on this trip. And I'm going to be your guide as we take a look at these countries of Slovenia, Croatia, and the Adriatic Coast. So let's talk about it, what the program entails. First of all, starting with the map. And of course, I think everybody knows roughly what we're talking about. Slovenia, Croatia form part of the Balkan countries on the east side of the Adriatic Sea, which is, of course, a part of the Mediterranean. And our program begins up in Ljubljana, which is the capital of Slovenia. And if you haven't been to Slovenia before, this is one of those places that people come away and go, wow, Ljubljana was like one of the absolute highlights of my trip. I mean, we're all in it for the Croatian archipelago, which is amazing, and Dubrovnik, but Ljubljana is really a special gem. And people often say to me, we should spend more time there. We should spend more time in a lot of places for sure. So we fly into Ljubljana, and we're going to actually spend 4 nights on Lake Bled, which is about a half an hour away, with these turquoise blue waters. You'll see some photos in a minute, like the one I just showed you from a previous trip. And from there, we're going to explore a little bit of the region around the northwestern part of Slovenia. We then travel overland down, stopping for a night in Plitvice, which is a national park in Croatia known for its waterfalls. From there, we continue down to Split, which is the second largest city in Croatia after the capital Zagreb. And Split is a major harbor, and is where most of the Croatian cruises sort of start and end at. And it's a great city in and of itself, actually. And so from Split, we'll spend a week cruising through this archipelago down as far as Dubrovnik, which is almost in Montenegro. And then back up. So again, we'll have a wonderful week on board this ship. And then for the last part of our journey, we will travel again overland via Zadar up to Opatija, which is on this peninsula, which we call Istria. And Istria, which is the largest peninsula in on the Adriatic, is the sort of the epicurean part of Croatia. And so we'll get a taste of that for our last 3 nights based in Opatija, and then return back to Ljubljana to fly home or continue our onward journey. So let's now have a look day by day. And I'm going to give you just a few of the highlights here. I'm not going to go through the program in great detail. The program itinerary that you may have already received, or if you haven't, you'll get it with a copy of the replay of this webinar. Will give you all of the sort of the day by day details. Lake Bled, as I mentioned, is a gem of a lake in the foothills of the southern Alps that effectively run along the northern part of Slovenia and the southern part of Austria. And so this is just a wonderful place to, you fly in, jet lag and all the rest of it. You arrive in Ljubljana and make the short transfer up to Bled. It's a charming, charming little town. And in fact, I always suggest to our hosts, which they normally follow my suggestion, the first thing is, particularly you get off a long flight, is you can walk all the way around the lake. It takes about an hour and a half. It's a beautiful walk. It has this lovely island in the middle with the church, which we're going to visit during our stay there. You can go and ring the church bell on the island. It's an absolutely idyllic, magical place. So we will spend 4 nights in Lake Bled. And during that time, we are going to explore a little bit of Slovenia. Again, the feedback I've gotten is you could spend a lot longer here, and maybe you'll come back and do that after you join us on this trip. But we're going to go up to another part in the far northwestern part of the country. So here we're talking about the border almost between Slovenia, Austria, and Italy. And there's this beautiful lake, arguably even more beautiful than Lake Bled. Lake Bled is famous because it's sort of turquoise blue in color, and you'll have seen the pictures of it, like the one that I showed you of our group shot at the beginning. Lake Bohinj is a typical alpine lake. So it's overshadowed by the Alps. You get a sort of a bit of a sense of it from the picture here. There's a beautiful waterfall. If the weather's right, we might do a cable car ride. So we have a lovely day exploring this alpine scenery that Slovenia is so known for. We're also going to make a trip into Ljubljana, which is, of course, the capital city. And Ljubljana is so charming. When you walk around it, it'll remind you of being in like Vienna or Salzburg, right? It has a lot of sort of Austrian flair. Well, let's face it, all this part of Europe was all part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire right up until World War I. And so the borders that we know today weren't there. And so the influences, the Austrian influences, if you will, from an architectural standpoint, even from a cultural standpoint, are so evident in Ljubljana. And it sits on the banks of the river and has a lovely pedestrian area, the Dragon Bridge. There's a palace that sits up on top of the hill. So we're actually modifying our program for next year to spend the whole day in Ljubljana, because the feedback we've gotten from members is we should spend half a day there. People are like, no, we want more Ljubljana. So we're going to spend the whole day. We'll tour around for a couple of hours with our local guide, and then we'll spend the day just soaking it all in. And the beauty is it's half an hour away. So I know that some of our members have said, I want to stay in Ljubljana for dinner and enjoy the evening, because it's lovely at night as well. And again, that's certainly something that's possible. As I mentioned, we're also going to cross over the border. We're only another 10 minutes, 15 minutes further north from Bled, and you get to the Austrian border, the southern province of Carinthia, or Kärnten in German. This is a part of Austria that people don't visit. That's why I thought it was worthwhile to include it in the program. And it's been quite popular. We will go up to the southern, or one of the most southerly lakes in Austria, the Southern Lake District, so-called Wörthersee. And this is one of the warmest lakes in Austria. I wouldn't say it's swimmable in April necessarily, but it is a beautiful lake, again, set amongst the Austrian Alps. And we'll take a cruise across the lake and visit Klagenfurt, which again is an example of an Austrian city that you probably wouldn't have heard of before until you read our program itinerary or saw this webinar. But it's a very different sort of aspect of Austria that you wouldn't normally get. So we spend the day touring around in Austria, and then after the fourth night on day 5, we will check out and make our journey south, the first leg down towards the Croatian archipelago. Our stop here is going to be at Plitvice, and Plitvice is a national park. In fact, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And what it's known for is, well, the picture kind of says it all. It's a whole series of lakes and waterfalls that are just magical. And so depending on the group, depending on the time that we get in there, we will do a boat tour on some of the lakes. We'll walk around some of the trails that lead all through this park. I mean, again, this is quite a large area, but we'll explore some of it, and it's a must-see kind of a thing to do. And we'll go there in the late afternoon, which is usually when it's a little less busy, because Plitvice is like one of the top things to do in Croatia. And so we've adjusted it so that we're going to go, in the mid-afternoon, which will give us a chance to explore without as many crowds as you get if you go first thing in the morning when the gates open. And we'll overnight in Plitvice as well at a lovely hotel. It's one of the best rated hotels from our members on the trip. And then the second day of our journey down south, we will head to Split, where we will embark upon our ship in the afternoon. We're going to actually visit a little town called Trogir, which is one of my favorites, a little tiny town on an island that's just about an hour before we get to Split. And it's a great little spot for a little lunch break. And they have a great cathedral in the middle of town. But I think the most favorite things is there's a gelateria, an ice cream shop in town that our members absolutely adore. So that's kind of where everybody makes a beeline for that after sitting in the car for a couple hours that day. Let's talk a little bit about the ship, because let's face it, that's what this program is all about. The Marittimo is a so-called super deluxe, or I think that's the category, the label that they put on this ship. It's a new ship to us. It's one of the nicest ships on the whole Adriatic Coast. So this ship is privately chartered by Wheel and Anchor, as we've done every year. And it is going to be our home for 7 nights as we cruise down and around the archipelago. The ship will accommodate, it has a total of 16 cabins. So roughly, depending on the number of solo travelers that we get, will be somewhere between 25 and 30 guests is what we typically have on this program. This is actually a very important point that I wanted to make, because in fact, I was just responding to one of our members, oh, how big are your groups, right? Everybody is, we make a point of traveling in small groups. However, when you want to charter a ship that has 17 cabins on board, obviously we can't do that for a dozen people. That wouldn't really wouldn't make the price tag very attractive. So what we do on this is we split the group into two. So if we are 28 people, which is I think the number that we have this year in Croatia, we actually have two groups of 14. So there are two guides. And in fact, for most of our excursions in Slovenia, there are two minibuses. So you're actually traveling around in a group of about 14 people. So it's a much more intimate experience, because I am not somebody that likes those tour groups where somebody's there with an umbrella and, 100 meters back, there's a whole row of people. That's not how we roll. So it's a very important point on this trip. So as I say, the Maritimo, which is you get a sense of it from the images here. This is a really beautifully designed yacht, ample room both inside and out, in which to enjoy this journey all around the Croatian archipelago. We have our meals on board. Well, we have breakfast and lunch on board. And again, this is what makes our itinerary special, is because the general program on board ship is that we sail during the morning. So we wake up, have a leisurely wake up. There's no 7 o'clock in the morning wake up call. We have a leisurely wake up and a breakfast. We're typically sailing in the morning. We arrive into our port in the latter part of the morning or early afternoon, depending on how far between ports. And then we'll have a light lunch on board ship as well. And then in the afternoon, we disembark and then have a guided tour of the town, or we don't have guided tours of all the towns because some of them are just more natural islands. And then we spend the afternoon and evening on shore. And then our members are at leisure to go out for dinner in the towns. And that's the part that I really like, because, my beef with cruises is I don't want to go and visit all these countries and just eat cruise ship food every single day. And the food is lovely. I mean, they do a great job. But the whole point about being in a place like Croatia is that you want to sample the local cuisine and eat in a little restaurant and in these little villages that we're going to visit along the way. So this gives you a sense of the ship. Again, very modern, very comfy, cozy. We have cabins on the main deck and on the upper deck. The main deck cabins have portholes, as you can see here. And then the cabins on the upper deck have windows. Now, how this is allocated by the ship that we worked out with them is that because we do get a lot of solo travelers on this trip, so we basically have made an arrangement with them such that the solo travelers will get the main deck cabins at a preferred price, or a lower single price than would ordinarily be the case. And then two people sharing a cabin, so couples or two people traveling together, will have the upper deck cabins that have the windows here. And then, some people say, oh, well, I'd rather not have a window with portholes. Here's the thing. Honestly, on a trip like this, you spend from the moment you get to bed around 9 or 10 o'clock at night until the morning, and otherwise you're not in your cabin. This isn't like cruising through the Caribbean or on a big ocean cruise where you want to retreat to your cabin and hang out for cocktails. You don't do that on this ship. People are hanging out with our other members of the trip. Again, the beauty of having our own chartered ship. So you're basically out and about all day, and you're really only sleeping in your cabin. So frankly, whether you had a window or not is really irrelevant to this journey. And I kind of want to stress that because it's important. Yeah. So anyway, enough said about that. We will leave from Split, so we'll actually overnight in Split and then head out in the morning, as I said, as per our usual protocol on this itinerary. And one of our first stops will be in Korčula, arguably my favorite town. I mean, I love all the towns on this trip, but Korčula is very interesting because when the city was designed, it's done in a herringbone sort of a pattern because it gets quite hot down here in summertime. And so the city's architects back 400 or 500 years ago, when the city was sort of built, decided they wanted to create cross ventilation, natural cross ventilation coming off of the sea. So it's done in a herringbone pattern. And again, classic, as I say, with these towns and villages in Croatia, narrow streets, cobblestone, and there's this great little turret, if you will, that you can see over here next to the where the ship docks, that you can go up and there's a last time I was there was a little bar up here that has a beautiful view over the harbor, and you get a sense of the scenery in the background. You've got mountains along the coast, you've got this archipelago of islands and all these little villages that you visit. Really quite magical. So Korčula, we'll have a short tour. We'll do a wine tasting in Korčula, and then we'll have the evening to just hang out along the promenade on the shore and enjoy the views from the island. After Korčula, we will go to Dubrovnik. Now, I want to make one other point here. So we have an itinerary that we tend to follow unless weather, sea conditions, or whatever change. So there are certain stops that are critical, like Dubrovnik. And so if it's necessary for us to rearrange something, I put the caveat in that we sometimes will change the program. So it might not go exactly in this order, usually does. And the point is, between our host and the cruise director and the captain, we want to make sure that you see all the best things and try to avoid if there's any bad weather along the way. But so far, our groups are pretty lucky and have good weather. Dubrovnik hardly needs introduction. Many of you will be familiar with it already. The pearl of the Adriatic, as they call it. One-time city-state, so it used to be its own country back in the day. In fact, it was only assimilated with Croatia some 150 years ago, if my historical figures are correct. It is an incredible city, and so we try to organize the tour so that the ship arrives as early as possible in the day, which usually is around midday, and we will have a short guided tour. Again, I think the guided tours are important to give you the context of the city, but Dubrovnik is just about meandering and taking it all in. We give all of our members a Dubrovnik city card, so you can go up on the city walls, which are actually not pictured here. This is a picture from the city wall to a little fortress on the peninsula right next door. But the medieval walls in Dubrovnik are like hardly any other place that you've been before. Every time I go, it just sends this chill down my spine, because it's one of the few medieval walled cities that are remaining in Europe. It's absolutely magical. And so we give advice. Dubrovnik is a popular place, so we know when the cruise ships are going to be there and what time they're going to leave. We have dinner at a fabulous restaurant. In fact, Todd was just messaging me earlier this morning saying, oh, we had an incredible meal, because it's a restaurant I picked out for our group on my first trip to Croatia some years back. And then after dinner, there's the opportunity to go sort of at sunset or in the early evening up to the walls and to look out over the bay and over the city. It's just magical. So anyway, I won't say anymore. I could go on and I could gush about Dubrovnik for quite a while. We'll leave Dubrovnik. Here's another photo of Dubrovnik. Yeah, that gives you a sense. Here it's devoid of people. It never actually looks like this unless you go at 3 o'clock in the morning. But it gives you a real taste of the grandeur of the city. So from Dubrovnik, we will then head to see some of the natural part of this archipelago, like Pelješac. So most of the islands and area is occupied, but some of it is not. And these are the times when we'll ask the captain to stop, anchor the ship, and do a little bit of swimming and snorkeling. The water is still cool in May. For Canadians, I would say on any trip, probably half the people get in the water and half the people, for them, it's a little bit too cold. The sea temperature in this time in May is probably around 17, 18 degrees Celsius. So I know it's a little chilly for some, but honestly, it's wonderful, the feeling of swimming in the Adriatic Sea, and there's some lovely spots that we can stop in at and enjoy the beautiful coastline. From Pelješac, we'll go to Hvar, and again, I'm avoiding some of the details of the towns that we're going to stop and have a tour and all the rest of it. You can find it all in the program itinerary. Hvar is one of those places that is it's a must-do, if you will, in Croatia. This is the jet set capital of the Adriatic in the summertime, where all the oligarchs' yachts back in the day anyway would come in, and there's a donkey in the background in case you can hear that. I'm in the countryside. All of the yachts are parked in the harbor here. There's a fortress that you can walk up to. In fact, I think we actually arrange a shuttle service to go up to the fortress, and you have this incredible view over the archipelago and the harbor and all these gleaming white yachts. There's an amazing museum in here where they actually have a portrait, or not a portrait, but a mural of the Last Supper. It's not the original, obviously, but it is just miraculous. A lovely, lovely town. And once again, you can stop, spend the evening at one of these restaurants along the harbor, and just sort of take it all in. Bol is another lesser known place, still popular among holidaymakers in summer, but it's the small villages that I think really give the charm of the Adriatic coast. And again, one of the other spots that we'll go to along the way. And after the course of a week, our cruise will sadly come to an end, and we'll be back in Split, which, as I say, in and of itself is an amazing city. And the ships moor right, more or less adjacent to downtown. It's about a 10-minute walk to the so-called Diocletian's Palace, which is an amazing building. The most interesting part of which is the sewage pit that they tour you through when you go through. Anyway, it's a long story. You'll have to go and check it out to see. But we also arrange a lovely, lovely dinner here after we disembark the ship, before we say goodbye to Split, and make our way up the coast to Istria. And along the way, as I say, we'll stop in Zadar. And our destination here will be a little town called Opatija. And Opatija was during the heyday of as I mentioned before, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Prussian Empire, the royalty of Europe. Where would they go on summer holidays? Opatija was the place. So this town has quite a bit of grandeur. I'm grateful that we are this year, or I should say next year, for this trip in 24, able to secure the Imperial Hotel again. We weren't able to get it in 2023. We weren't fast enough off the mark, but we have secured the Imperial Hotel in the middle of Opatija, and it's a marvelous place to take in this peninsula, which is Barb, you came on early. Did you
Well, I'm just wondering if they're waiting to get into the webinar, Sarah, and is it Miranda? Do you see them waiting?
Oh, I didn't see them there. Okay. I don't see them.
No. Okay. Elsa called them. They're on the phone and they're trying to
Okay.
get in.
Yeah.
Anyways, just thought I'd let you know.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for that. I don't see them in the list here, so something went wrong with their thing. Anyway, let me just continue on about Istria. Istria is sort of one of the bread baskets, if you will, of Croatia. It is known for delicious local food, and we'll obviously sample some of it while we're there. And while we're in Istria, we're gonna take a little bit of a tour around. We're gonna visit Pula, which is known for its incredible Roman ruins. This is down at the very end of the peninsula. We're gonna go up to Motovun, where a lovely fortress city that sits at the top of a hill with a beautiful view. And it's near here that we are going to have our last supper, our own last supper, if you will, our farewell dinner, and again, enjoying the delights from the region. This was one of the favorite culinary experiences that we had on the trip. And then it will come to a close, and unfortunately we will have to head off to Ljubljana after 16 wonderful days, Slovenia, Croatia, enjoying this incredible part of the country. So just a few logistical details before we get to the Q&As. So if you have any questions, please have them ready and we'll address them in just a moment. Of course, all of the details, pricing and inclusions and all the rest of it are in our program itinerary that you can get by, if you haven't gotten a copy already, I think it came out in a newsletter 1 or 2 editions ago. Otherwise, we'll send you a copy with a replay of this webinar. This just gives you a taste of what we're looking at here. So as you can see, the delta between the double rooms and the single rooms is relatively small. I will note, because I know some people have already commented to us, that Prices have gone up relatively substantially into 2024. This is a function simply of three things. There's a huge demand in the travel business in Europe right now, now that the Asians have returned to traveling in Europe, not to mention the fact that inflation has taken hold and is relentless, which has pushed prices up significantly. And of course, our dollar has taken a battering. So between those three factors, we've seen a bit of an uptick in prices. But hopefully that will not continue. But I have some good news on that, which I'll mention in just a moment. Talking about inclusions, of course, we have wonderful hotels, at least 2 meals a day, breakfast and either lunch or dinner every day, that are included in the program, the Dubrovnik card. So it's quite an inclusive program. You do have the freedom to have your own dinners while on board the ship. And again, I think that's a big part of the appeal of this program, is that you're not stuck eating on the boat all the time, which again, they have great food on the ship, but it's nicer to enjoy these restaurants. The only thing you have to look for in addition is, of course, airfare and insurance. We can, our office can facilitate both of those for you. And I say this with a bit of a caveat because we've seen airfares go all over the place of late, but this gives you a sense for this year of where airfares to Ljubljana ended up at, return fares. And let's hope that it's, at the moment, that's what we're looking at for next year. So we don't want to leave it too late. The good news is that we have secured for this program a particularly generous early booking bonus. And so in fact, yeah, it says here June the 15th. I'm going to try and push that a little bit. But if you book this trip before at least June the 15th for sure, then we get $1,000 off. Why? If we commit with the deposit to our particularly cruise partner, the owner of the yacht, then they just give us a better deal. It's the bottom line. So we pass that on to you. So do take note of that. And if you're interested in the program, we do encourage you, book early. And as I say, demand in travel in Europe is at all-time highs post-pandemic. And so it's important for us to plan ahead. I know a lot of our members rather would book last minute. I like to book last minute too, but those days are more challenging now. If you don't, if you have any questions that we aren't able to address or that I haven't already mentioned on the webinar today, please do drop a message to either Paula or Barb. The email address is shown there. I'm sure you probably already have it. You can always message info@wheelandanchor.ca and that will land in the right hands. And in the meantime, I will take any questions, Barb, that might have come in from our members.
Yeah, sure. Somebody is asking about how rough the seas are, if they are susceptible to seasickness.
Thank you. Good question. In fact, our host, Todd, on the current trip, gets desperately seasick. And so he was a little paranoid going into this year's trip. He said the seas were generally pretty calm. Number one. Number two, he was recommended to use the patches. They have these anti-motion sickness patches, and he said they worked like a charm. So the week before this week, so last week before our group this year got on the trip, they had some inclement weather. You read about it probably in the news. The seas were a little bit on the rough side, but I would say that is the exception and not the norm in May. That's why we pick May. Generally, there are, some sections of the cruise for an hour or two where you might be on the outside of the archipelago, so you're exposed to the high seas, but it's not like crossing the Atlantic or any other big ocean. It's pretty calm. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, perfect. Okay. We do have a question about currency used for this trip.
So the Croatia has now adopted the euro as of the 1st of January of this year. So that is welcome news. So the currency is euros throughout. Slovenia has used the euro for several years. And Croatia, as I say, just got rid of their currency, just a few months ago. So that's good news.
Oh, and I think somebody's just joined.
Yes, I see Sarah's just joined us now at the end of the webinar.
Hello. Hello.
Welcome, Sarah and Martina. We're at the very oh dear.
Sorry, but we had a big problem trying to connect to the webinar.
Yeah, we tried 40 minutes.
Oh no. Okay, good. Well, we're just wrapping up. I'm just taking some questions from our members. So anyway, these are our lovely partners in Croatia who would have otherwise co-presented with me on the webinar.
Yeah.
But I just want to let you know we have wonderful partners that we work with. And so if there's any questions that you have for our friends Sarah and Martina in Croatia, Barb, we can continue on with the questions and I can pass them on to them.
Okay, there's just a couple more. One is Havar is a food. Is it jarred and sold in grocery stores?
Oh, is Havar a food as well as a... I see a blank.
Havar is not a food. Maybe then if you heard the name, it's a grocery.
Yeah, that's how it's said. I don't know. Okay.
Could be, don't know. It's definitely a town in Croatia. Maybe somewhere else it's a food. I don't
They
know.
have to go and find out themselves, I think.
Gotta come and check it out. And if you find a jar, bring it and we'll
Oh, it's a food manufacturer. Okay. So she's wondering if it's sold in the grocery stores. I don't know. Are you going on the trip, Gordon? That's another question.
going on the trip. That is unclear at this point. We have not done our 2024 hosting schedule as yet. So no guarantees, but I can tell you one thing I can guarantee, you'll have a great host. So we have a great lineup of hosts, whether it's myself or Amber or Todd or Valerie or Michelle or on and on and on. We have some amazing hosts. So thank you for the question. I'll take that as a compliment. But I don't know yet whether I'll be on this trip next May or not.
Okay, we do have a question about the average age of travelers and the level of activity, which is important.
Yeah, okay, two good questions. So the average age, Barb, I think for this trip this year, I think the average age came in around
probably 65 or so.
It's generally the average age in our trips now. It's been coming down. Actually, we've been attracting some younger travelers. But I would say the range is sort of anywhere from around 57, 58. We don't usually get people that are in their early 50s. And then we do get a handful of people that are sort of on into their late 70s. That's about it. The key thing though is we're not ageist here. You can be any age you want. The second question is the more relevant one about mobility. Listen, these towns, well, Sarah, Miranda, you explain about these towns and, there are cobblestone streets and you've got to walk up and down a little bit. So you need to be quite active, yeah?
Yeah, you don't need to be in the best shape of your life, but you need to be prepared to walk through narrow streets and uphill maybe a little bit. We can always organize a transfers for the elderly or people that are not so fit. So we always prepare and plan the excursions according to the group. They can have only a slight walking down to the streets or maybe some other activities.
Yeah, and our groups generally are fairly active. So honestly, we've had folks that have come along and have not been able or willing to walk quite as far. Mm-hmm. And the beauty is on this trip is theoretically, you can enjoy a lot of the scenery from the ship. But to enjoy all the towns and to be able to walk up the streets and to walk, for example, into Plitvice, which is a fairly long walk through the park, to enjoy those activities, there's just no other way to do it. You need to be able to walk. So we have a benchmark in our information about being able to walk on average 10,000 steps a day at a minimum. And to be able to walk a kilometer in less than, I think, 20 minutes, if I'm not mistaken, Barb, is what it says. So if you have a look at that, And if you have any questions, sort of true yourself up to that benchmark, because it's a benefit for everybody if you're able to keep up. So anyway, hopefully I haven't.
Yeah, I'll just mention that if anybody's interested in this trip or any of our trips, we always have an additional information document, which is really important. It has a lot of, it answers a lot of other questions pertaining to fitness and requirements of when you need to fly in and out, temperatures, country information, currency. So if anybody is considering it, they just need to email or call us, and we'll always send you the additional information, which answers a lot of questions right up front. So that's always good for people to do. Because the next question we do have is average temperature and humidity.
May, so not counting last week, which was an abnormal, but what is the weather normally like in Croatia at this time in sort of middle of May?
Well, we have now like 28 degrees.
28.
So yeah, 28 degrees. In the morning, 22. And in the middle of the day, like 20.
That's warmer than average. You say that the average temperature is, my experience is like right now, and I'm at the same latitude. I'm just across the Adriatic in Puglia, and it was about 24, 25 today. The evening it cools off to like 17, 18 degrees. So honestly, traveling wise, weather-wise, it's perfect. Humidity, it's not humid really at all. It's quite dry, so it's not. This isn't a tropical adventure. This May, and when we go, October is, in my opinion, the best time to go. It's not summer, it's not hot, but it's if anything, it's on the cooler side. It's perfect.
Yeah, it's still warm. They can still swim in the sea, and it's not too crowded in the cities.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the more important thing. Towns are not packed like they are in summer. Yeah. Any other questions?
Just one more question, which is if the early booking bonus applies per cabin or per person?
No, that's per person. That's
per person. All prices, Canadian dollars per person.
Canadian dollars per person. So yeah. So in other words, 2 people, $2,000. So that's why it's a good idea to go. Listen, this trip generally sells out pretty quickly, just judging by our previous trips to Croatia up till now. And so it's a good idea, any event, to get on board early. Cool.
Good. I think that's all that's come in. Tomorrow we do have our Iceland webinar. If anybody's interested, I've just posted the link if people want to register.
Yeah, perfect. So if you have any other questions about Croatia and Slovenia that we didn't answer today, or something more personal to your situation, nobody asked us about food. We can accommodate pretty much any dietary requirements. If you are if you have something very specific, if you're a very strict vegan, for example, we need to look at that a little bit more carefully. But for the most part, that's we can handle that as well. But if there's any other questions that come up, drop us a note. Sarah, Miranda, I'm sorry that we didn't get to present with you, but nevertheless, we get to have your lovely faces with us today. So, and we look forward to enjoying another trip to Croatia next year. And this is really a marvelous trip. It's one of our most popular, and I'm sure you'll have a great time if you decide to come along. So take care, have yourselves a wonderful rest of the day, and join us for Iceland tomorrow. As Barb mentioned, if you're interested in Iceland, where we'll be heading in June of 2024. And next week's webinars are about Norway and Australia. So details in this weekend's newsletter. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.